Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very special guest. Before we introduce our guest, we do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to public education in the form of a free gift. So if your district needs unrestricted funds, reach out to Ideal Impact. Okay, we have another very special guest. We have Dr. Saylor from Aubrey ISD. Dr. Saylor, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I am pronouncing your name right, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, awesome. Well, cool. So, just so everybody gets to know you a little bit, could you share a little bit about your background and a little bit about your district too, where it's located, the size, that sort of thing?
Sure will. I started in this district in 1997. Started my teaching career in the North Dallas area. I did a couple years in a large school district and a middle school, and then I came to this school district where I am now in 97 to actually be a head coach. So I was a head volleyball coach, coached just about any sport on the girls' side of athletics. Teacher, and I really got into education so that I could coach because that was I was passionate about coming out of college after playing basketball in college. And then I fell in love with teaching. So therefore, I quit the coaching route and continued the teaching route and then went into administration in the school district. I was a high school counselor, high school assistant principal, opened up an elementary school in this district. And then to get back into secondary, I actually left Aubrey ISD for 4 years as a high school principal in two other neighboring districts and came back. Came back to Aubrey ISD in 2014, so 10 years ago, came into central office and was assistant superintendent of HR and student services for 6.5 years. And then on December 1st of 24, I'll celebrate my 1 year anniversary as superintendent in Aubrey ISD. And we are located north of Dallas, where the Dallas North Tollway ends. We're just about probably 7 miles west of that. So it's a highly populated growth area that we have going on right now. And so I think back to when I got to Aubrey in 1997, we had about 40 kids per grade level, and right now we're about 300 kids per grade level. So it's grown quite a bit.
Wow. Yeah, awesome story. Awesome. Um, man. So I always find it interesting when superintendents have that sports background. There's something about it, just strategy and competitiveness, and I don't know if that's the case. It always paints that picture though. When I hear about it, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Uh, so yeah, love to hear. There's a lot going on in public education. Yeah, we
Mhm.
talk a lot about finance on the podcast, but that's a hot topic, right? Sometimes talk about culture. What's kind of your hot button or focus area in public ed these days?
Yeah, I think you're right on it when it talks about financing, especially in Texas with legislatures, legislature coming together in the biennium and having a surplus. Texas has done so well economically, and then divvying out some of that money to public schools. I think when I think of public schools, that's what I'm excited about in public education is we are the cornerstone of our community. In Aubrey ISD, we serve 4 different municipalities, with our city of Aubrey being one of them, but we've got 3 other municipalities that we serve. But in the end, we're all chaparrals. Our mascot, it looks like a road runner, but it's the chaparral. And so, those Friday nights, we're a one high school town. And so our community gets really excited and really gets behind our public school here. So, hot button, with our growth, we've been pretty lucky to be able to pass a balanced budget, which I know is not what a lot of our surrounding districts do, but Aubrey ISD, I think I'm the superintendent that started in the 70s. I actually know him, and I'm like the fourth one since him. So there's been a lot of longevity here and a lot of stability when it comes to that. And so it's in our school board of trustees DNA to pass a balanced budget every year. We've got to find a way to balance it. And so that's what we've been charged to do. So we've been able to do that. That doesn't mean that we get everything we want, and we don't have any of those positions that could do some things that are extra for kids, like can we start a wrestling program or tennis program or some of those. Sometimes it comes down to budgeting and personnel units that we can't afford to. But with our growth, we've been pretty lucky to be able to still give small raises and some stipends because we've had that ongoing consistent enrollment. From last year to this year, we grew by 12%. And, that's 450 kids. It doesn't seem like a lot, but in a district of 4,400 kids, it is a lot of kids. So we've been able to at least finance some things creatively through some of the growth that we've had.
Got it, got it. And just so myself and some of our listeners, when you talk about y'all were able to do a balanced budget, which is not common in some other districts. Talk a little bit more about that. Is that more of just like being more conservative, fiscally conservative on your spending?
Mhm.
Is that kind of what the linchpin in the whole thing? I don't know. What's it?
I think it is. I think it's really paying attention to teacher utilization, our master schedule, ensuring that we're loading, especially the secondary schedules appropriately. If a class only has 7 requesters, it might not be a subject or a class that makes. And in a 6A, you can probably filter it in there, but in the size of 4A that we are, it's really pay attention to those. We have a single AP on elementary campuses that have 600 kids. A lot of school districts might have a 1.2 AP philosophy or a 1.2 counselor, but we've run a single counselor and single AP in some of those areas. We've got one district RN, and our libraries are staffed by library paraeducators or library aides in those areas versus the librarian. So, a big chunk of our salary, just like any other school in Texas, goes mainly toward classroom teachers and salaries. A whole lot of that's going toward teacher salaries. So to really make an impact on your budget, you've got to cut personnel, which is not something we want to do. And we want to ensure that we still have math interventionalists and reading specialists. But we don't have we don't have a curriculum department. We have a C&I director, but our curriculum and some of our curriculum management and our lesson planning are done by the practitioners in the classroom, such as giving extra pay or days or stipend in a June type setting where they can help write our curriculum in the summer. And then they're teaching in the classroom in August. So it's not a department that does that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what we've paid a lot of attention to, ensuring that we utilize personnel to the highest extent that we can.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. And by doing it that way versus some of the other districts doing it differently, what's the value that it brings for the district overall? Or, well, I mean, doing it, a balanced budget, what's the value that that brings to the district?
It's that comfort level to know that we're going to be able to function and go, because we also have to add money to our fund balance or our savings account every year, because by statute, we're required to have 3 months of functioning, or our budget for 3 months. We've got to be able to, we like to have 4 months of, the ability to go without payment for 4 months. But as we grow, so does our budget. So therefore, if we only have 4 months of expenditure in there, next year, as we grow by 10% or 12% students, that might only equate to 3.5 months. So we've got to balance and continue to try to put money in our fund balance, which is a challenge, because we still need those things. We still need the HVAC units that may go out, some larger capital purchases that may hit us, but we really, we're 4A, and our athletic director is also our head football coach. We don't have a director of fine arts, and some of those areas that some schools, as we've grown, we've looked at staffing studies to ensure we add them when needed. But essentially, we really want to put our money into classroom teachers and ensure that we stay under the 22-1 cap in, K-4, and then not overload our 5th grade and up classrooms.
That makes sense. And I see that in business too, where people, they'll have, a certain amount of overhead. And
Mhm.
then, do you take on that overhead up front, or do you add people
Yeah.
as
Yeah, and our teachers are,
yeah.
our staff and our principals do a really good job of being financially conservative too. When they get their budgets, they don't blow their budgets before January 1, because they know that if we do have to cut, if we end up where in order to balance, we've got to have $1 million, we can get that from supplies, or from not purchasing a school vehicle, or from not purchasing a police officer car or upgrading a police officer car. We can continue to drive the one that may have 80,000 miles on it. So it's really paying attention to it. And our business office has done a phenomenal job of keeping track of ensuring that, where we are on our average daily attendance enrollment, and then where we are on our budget expenditures.
So with that being said, with the whole balanced budget, I know there's a lot of districts complaining about the state and funding. Are are y'all in that camp where you're like,
We are, yeah, because
yeah.
we're still looking at a 2019 funding. The basic allotment has not increased since 2019. So we're looking at 5 years in order, we've not, so there's no inflation increase. Dallas Morning News ran an article and had a posting of a study, rather than the basic allotment being 6,000 a kid, if it had kept up with our, because everybody's getting wants raises, the cost of milk. I mean, Doritos are 2 for $6 for a family size. I'm floored by that. But the way the costs have gone up, our funding has not increased. Fuel prices, insurance, I think our insurance has gone up 100% in 3 years. With all those going up, the basic allotment has not. But the Dallas Morning News study said if the basic allotment increased, we would get this much per child. And it was about, I think it was $1,400 extra per child on the basic allotment. So times that by 4,000 kids. And that's what money we could have to function. But instead we're saying, hey, let's not do this field trip. Let's cut here. Let's not get a new school vehicle right now. Let's hold off on these HVAC systems, patch them as best you can. Let's hold off. But we have money that we have for those capital outlay purchases, but we're also very frugal. And our board does a great job of ensuring and expecting a balanced budget.
That's awesome. It sounds like a great approach, because it doesn't seem like y'all are in like a bind, but obviously you could use the funding if it were
Absolutely.
available.
Absolutely. Especially when you're talking about, these kids that are in fourth grade and older, having been the COVID kids that went home and ensuring that their academic needs are met. Lots of creative things, and we do it. A counselor in an elementary school to have a caseload of 600 is not very common in an elementary campus. And they're doing the academic guidance support, the responsive intervention, and, groups, guidance in the classroom, social emotional support. So they're doing it all versus having additional personnel to do that as well.
Got it. It makes sense. So, what's on the horizon for you guys, right? So it sounds like you are managing your business really well, managing the budget really well. What do y'all see in the future at the district?
Lots of growth. We're blessed to be in an area that has, I think of 10 years ago when I came back as Aubrey High School principal, we had 2,200 kids, and today we sit at over 4,400. So we are in another 10 years, we're expected to double that number and be closer to 9 or 10,000 students. So we're continuing growing. Kids are, continuing to enroll for us. Our leadership development program we do for our staff to encourage, since we're growing, hiring from within. If we have director positions or coordinators, we do some training with our staff to be able to have some internal movement and hire from within. But we're also still close enough that, I can mentor principals and my assistant can mentor assistant principals and help grow. But I think of the amount of families that are coming in with different needs. We've got 50 plus languages in Aubrey ISD. Like 10 years ago, we were English and Spanish. But right now we have more than 50. We started a bilingual program last year. So lots of demographic changes that are awesome. We opened a new elementary school this year, and then we're opening a second middle school in the fall of 25. And we've got 2 more elementary schools ready to come in the next 6 to 8 years as the growth continues to go. So with that growth comes extra funding based on children, but we still fund on their attendance, not their body attending school or their body enrolling, but their seat time is how we get funded for those children. So we get increased funding because we have increased enrollment, but I do feel for those districts that have stagnant enrollment or older communities, and they've not had the extra bodies to attend school to increase their funding. So we've been blessed by having kids continue to enroll in North Texas.
Yeah, so if they're stagnant and they got the same amount of funding, what's the biggest impact in that? Is that like inflation, or just is that
I
is that
think so. Yep.
Yep.
If they're not having any growth and they're having higher cost in fuel, transportation, food prices, insurance, and they're having to do some funding out there, if they have a teacher leave, it might not be a spot they replace. Or they may be looking at in Texas, we've got to keep to a 22-to-1 ratio before a waiver in kindergarten through fourth grade. And it might be a fourth grade class that has 24 in it. A kindergarten class more than, we'd love for kindergarten to be 17 or 18 kids for optimum learning, but 22 is what we would go up to. But I can see districts not hiring or replacing a teacher to try to balance their budget, which is a shame.
So, and who's responsible for that at the state level? Is that Governor Abbott, or is that?
I heard I can't remember who said it, but they said that when the legislature doesn't have very much money, they tend to get along and it becomes kind of a joint effort in funding things. But when they have so much money, it becomes like a married couple fighting over money.
Okay.
So that was an analogy I was given a long time ago to workshop. And it, with the surplus budget that Texas has in the billions, if they'd not put any money toward public ed in 5 years, they took care of us 3 bienniums ago by passing some legislation and upping our basic allotment. But I think it's, we all know that Greg Abbott is really pushing for school vouchers to have families be able to have school choice. And we've already got school choice going on. We've got charters, we've got privates, we've got online. We take transfer kids here in Aubrey. If we've got the capacity and room for them and they reside in another district, we will let them enroll. So there's some choice there. But I think tying the school increase of the basic allotment to school vouchers is probably what will happen this legislative session, this session to help us increase our funding, assuming that goes through. So it's the legislation led by the governor if he signs off on it, with the vouchers passing.
Well, I have reached out to his office to get him on the podcast.
Okay.
I don't know if he's going to attend, but he does have a email from his assistant. So
Yeah.
let's see
Well,
if we
good.
let's hear it straight from him. What's going on?
Yeah. And he tweets and posts and things about public school and really supports public ed. And I get his supporting of parent rights, but I think that when you put state money toward private institutions and they have no accountability, how do they disclose their funding? How do they disclose their accountability? And how do they disclose that their kids are being successful? And are they taking every kid or just the kids that they get to choose? There are some things that they can put into place to help make it an equitable process, with school vouchers, assuming that's the way that the legislation will go in the spring.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. Well, this is exciting. This is a unique perspective we haven't really had. I don't think I've ever had anybody that talked about a balanced budget. So that's really cool.
Well, I mean,
And
we're proud of it and we
yep,
love to do it, but it doesn't come at the cost of exhaustion. Like I have an assistant superintendent that's over human resources and student services, two huge jobs, especially when we're hiring and adding 60 new staff members a year. I don't doubt that our business office of 4 is doing the job of 6 people. And our APs are doing the job of 2 APs, and our teachers are, working their tails off, and they're hard workers. So I think we kind of run a tight ship here, but our people are really, really good and really responsive, and most importantly, they just love to take care of kids.
yep. Yeah, yeah, I get it. And yeah, every little bit helps, right? So you're doing a great job with what you have, but if you had more, obviously you could put it to use, is what it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yeah. And we don't want to fluff it. We don't want to do that. And we're not buying luxury items and we're not taking trips and things like that. We want to put that money toward the classrooms and the kids learning.
Yep. Well, very cool. I know we're running short on time here. Last question. If you were to think of another superintendent, a leader in public ed to come on the podcast, who's the first person that comes to mind?
I think the predecessor before me, who was here for 7 years, David Belding, left Aubrey and went to Midlothian ISD,
Okay.
district about double the size. He's a great visionary. He's a great ambassador for public schools. I think he would be phenomenal.
Love it.
But you have
Okay.
to play the Saved by the Bell podcast if you get Dr. Belding on.
I like it. Yeah, well, I have to get some of that music going.
I don't know what kind of royalties there are, but he mentored me in my role here. I was in my last year as high school principal when he was hired as superintendent. And then that second year with him, he moved me over to central office and I learned a great deal under him.
Okay. Well, we will reach out to him. I'd love to have him on. Everybody brings a unique perspective, and that's the beauty of this podcast. We're spreading the good word and sharing lessons learned and exciting things that are happening.
Very
So
good. Thank
awesome.
you for doing it.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Saylor, for being on the podcast today.
All right. You're welcome. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Okay, well, before we close out, we do want to give a shout out to our sponsor one last time, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to public education. I want to say, don't quote me on this, I want to say they're close to $1 billion they've given to public education. So if your district needs unrestricted funds, reach out to Ideal Impact. And for those that have been tuning in, stay tuned for future episodes of the Educational Leadership Podcast.